Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Church is Stupid,
Comma butt.
part 2 of the week, but this is a different part of the week, and now our titles are very confusing. Today?
Yeah. Glad you're here with us.
Yeah, very glad that you could join us. Today, instead of looking at like a part 2 to D&D, because we've already done 3 sections on that, if you need more D&D, there's enough of that out there for you. Today, we're going to be looking at some controversial books inside of the church and different things like that. So a little bit of introductions, because you may not know us all by now. I am Andy.
I am Ruth.
I'm Elijah.
And I'm Christopher.
You did not go in order, Elijah. You skipped over Christopher.
Christopher's the guest. He goes last.
Yeah.
Oh.
Come on. You got to do
Lightning
main people,
Right.
and then...
I see I was the wrong one.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go back
Yeah.
to my independent reading now.
Okay, good.
That's fine.
We'll come back to you in a minute.
Hey, what are you reading there?
Oh, this is a nice little book by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce. Yes, The Great Divorce. Because believe it or not, back in the day of the 80s, C.S. Lewis...
40 years ago.
Oh, stop. Stop it.
Why is it so long ago?
I know. I'm sorry. I had to. Anyway, sorry.
You're the worst.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Sorry.
You ruined my whole bit.
I absolutely
So,
did.
thank you for that. But believe it or not, in a much less cool voice, C.S. Lewis, I'm holding it up for all of the people who can't see me, was a controversial author. And there were a lot of Christians that called for both C.S. Lewis and Tolkien to be banned from Christians' libraries. Dun, dun, dun. And so this is my banned book of the day. C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce.
What a catastrophic
like
day for
4
society that would have been.
Banned book of the day.
Yeah.
How long do you think you could go without repeating a book?
451
Probably
days.
a long
so
time.
long.
You could go a really long
I
time.
know.
It'd be great. I
Now-
should make that an actual mission.
No
You
one-
someday.
should.
Nobody heard my
I
joke.
want to know.
Nobody cared about
I
your
said
joke.
451.
Fahrenheit
Oh.
451. Aren't
funny.
you cultured? So my love for banned books, I blame my darling mother. Mom, that's 2 weeks in a row you're getting a shout out. Love you, Mom.
I
Anyhow,
think it's 2 episodes in a row.
whatever. I knew what I meant. Anyhow, he's right. It's 2 episodes. But anyhow.
Thank you for admitting that. And now that I have it on tape, I'm going to cut out just that section and...
What, frame it on
Repeat
your
it.
wall?
No, I'm going to make it my ringtone.
Every time I call.
You were right.
You were
Oh, my God.
You were right.
I have made a grave mistake. Anyhow, when my mom was a kid, her school came out with a banned book list. And from this band, just a list of controversial books, which likely included things like Fahrenheit 451, and all sorts of those. I don't remember when it was written, so I
Was
don't
this
know if that's actually one of them.
Catholic school?
No, she went to public school.
Okay.
And
oh, wow, okay.
Anyhow, so my grandmother sat my mom down and she bought every single book that was on the list of banned books and made my mom read them.
That's rad.
So basically, I come from a very long line of really awesome people. And so banned books are something that really didn't exist in my house. And I can remember when the very first time that I dealt with a controversial book in the church or when dealing with other Christians, it was the world-renowned Harry Potter. Yes, applause.
I see that you held up the 4th book while I have the 1st book.
You asked me for the book.
Well, I was.
Did
gonna
you do this to
see,
shame me?
No. See, what was going to happen is I was going to start off our conversation about banned books by reading the first page or like the first section, which would have been really cool. But then you took over with C.S. Lewis, and I got lost. So,
Well, it's because, I blame Elijah. He got
I
me
also
off track.
blame Elijah.
I'm sorry, guys.
I can see things being drawn from Harry Potter to why that might be not welcome in some Christian communities. That's fine. What I don't understand is why C.S. Lewis, because he was a Christian author, right? And there were a lot of Christian metaphors that he put into his novels.
Yes, but C.S. Lewis was a believer in evolution.
Oh.
He was very prominent. In fact, one of his books, he includes a quote that says, any person who has a brain, essentially, knows that evolution is real. And if you don't believe it, you're just ridiculous. It's not an exact quote.
I know, I'm looking at the exact
It's
quote for you.
Sounds like C.S. Lewis,
don't scare
though.
me. But
And
he
I'm sure-
very much believed that if you were of a scientific mind, and he didn't really think there was any argument against it. And that was very unpopular.
I'm
with
sure the
Christians.
Christian community in the 80s took that very, very well.
Well, yeah, they didn't.
40 years ago, again, just a reminder. One more time.
But Tolkien was controversial because a lot of his works involve fantasy and things like fantasy and magic, and so that's why Tolkien and C.S. Lewis are a part of a lot of banned books because they get it. And some of C.S. Lewis's works, for instance, the one that I was just talking about, The Great Divorce, it is actually about purgatory, and that in and of itself is controversial because some Christians believe in purgatory, some do not. And so that one's controversial. We have Chronicles of Narnia, which is a retelling of Scripture through storytelling, but it also has fantasy and magic. And that any time that the world gets a little bit too close to that, it makes people uncomfortable.
I mean, not to mention with Tolkien that he has a ridiculous, and thorough like backstory to everything about Middle Earth, and a lot of like the backstory to the creation of Middle Earth and that entire universe. There's like all these different kinds of like gods and demigods and stuff in that universe as well that I'm sure a lot of people did not have a very good taking to.
It's pretty obscure.
In the Silmarillion, is that how you pronounce it? Is it Silmarillion?
There's an L in there.
I don't even. Oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. I can't even.
Silmerfud.
I'll be honest, I was looking up different things, and I have no idea where the conversation has led to. So are we talking about Lord of the Rings? Is that where we're at?
We're talking about C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, and I was just I was remembering that with Tolkien, not only did he just create just a fantasy world with magic, but that a lot of like his backstory for Middle Earth involves different gods of that universe and demigods and all these things that I'm sure a lot of people did not like because he was creating a world that wasn't like Yahweh God. You know what I mean?
But I think, sorry, not to bring the conversation back to this point, but I think
we're all over the place. Anyway.
I know we're jumping all over the place, but I think C.S. Lewis' books of Narnia is a very interesting place to start this or to continue this conversation, because, like we said, that is a telling of more or less the Christ story, not even just the Christ story.
Yeah,
through an aspect that appeals to more of society, and so more people are getting cultured to it. And I do know that some people don't know that it's based on some of the religious aspects, and some people harp on the fact that it is based on the religious aspects way too much. Like it is a work of fantasy, but it has those elements in it that drive you toward this Christ-like figure of Aslan.
Yeah, it's like a step above just a fantasy tale that's inspired by like the Bible. It's a step above that to where you can almost argue that it's in certain ways almost retelling stories from it in a fantasy setting, So it is a little, I mean, it is much different than Lord of the Rings. Because with Lord of the Rings and all that, you can draw parallels and see inspiration from, but I don't really think that you can argue too much that it's, that it's retelling anything directly from the Bible as much, at least as much as, like the Chronicles of Narnia.
Sorry, I found the sort of quote. It says, in Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis flatly affirmed, everyone now knows that man has evolved from lower types of life. So it's just
stating it like everyone knows, yeah.
That is nowhere near the quote that you said, but at the same time, I accept it.
In the context of it, though, in the context of his position,
it's just that she sent me on a goose hunt for this quote about the brain of man and everyone having a brain. And that had nothing to do with it.
It did not. You're right. Basically assumed that all my quotes need to be fact checked every single time.
I'm having a bit of trouble thinking of where we were.
Anyhow, I'm sorry, that was a really bad interruption, but I also zoned out much like Andy and was looking that up and then didn't know where we were.
Because you were talking about your first experience Harry Potter,
That's
And
what-
then, and then
what-
we kind of delved onto the track of C.S. Lewis because it's a little less understandable because he's literally like
A Christian
telling a
author.
Christian story
And so
in a
Andy
way.
had brought it back around to people saying either it's too close to Scripture or it's
Yeah.
too
Too far.
far.
So where are we now?
I think, well, that's where we were.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I don't mind touching on that a little bit because we all know I like to talk.
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's very.
Sorry.
You're so
We love
dejected.
It's not wrong. But C.S. Lewis, for people who like a really unique, creative, interesting story, Chronicles of Narnia probably not the right one for them because it is very steeped in I mean, it is the story essentially of what happens. So it's not necessarily the most unique. Yeah, is that a fair thing to say? Whereas some of his other works are much more unique, like the Screw Tape Letters or the Great Divorce. Those are very interesting and more unique. But for other people, because most of the time, my guess is they haven't read it. The people who are super against it, because they don't see that you can't possibly read the Chronicles of Narnia and not see that it's pretty much one for one. You know what I mean? Like the things that happen. Aslan literally goes to a stone table and gets, spoiler alert, he gets sacrificed for these people. Then the stone breaks and Aslan's alive again.
Yeah.
And it's pretty paralleled.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's why I think those two things exist.
And I think that we have an interesting part of religion that gets involved in our public schools and a lot of our different public aspects from this. And we touched a little bit on it, but the banned book list. But a lot of books that are banned in public schools, especially sometimes in the further southern areas inside the United States, and my knowledge about banned books in schools is all based in the United States, so I might be a little biased.
Very true.
But a lot of these books are banned for different religion reasons, or that because there's a large religious group that pushes for a book to be banned. Certain books that I'm guessing some of us read in high school, like I know I read Kite Runner as one of those assigned books, and I don't know if you guys
I didn't
know
read
that
Kite
one.
Runner. Scarlet Letters one.
Yep.
That one gets banned a lot.
I'm trying to think of
For
the other ones
religious
now that I had like a list. I had a
Of
list
ones that
ready
are
to go.
banned or that are religious.
Religious ones that are banned that I read in high school because they were banned in other schools.
Oh.
I have zero experience with this subject, so I'm kind of just backing off because I don't remember anything about banned books in our schools. There very well may have been.
Well,
But-
it's not that the books were banned in my school. It's that
Well, I don't remember hearing anything about like any school. Like I don't
about-
remember growing up with that as any kind of. I didn't even know that happened.
Slaughterhouse
Honestly.
5, maybe? Slaughterhouse 5 has a very, it could be anti-religion because it's a very, and so it goes, said Billy Pilgrim. That is actually a quote for the record. But that one is very pointless. I mean, it talks about the beginning and end of the universe as if they're not, or well, the end of the universe as if it's nothing. It doesn't really talk about the beginning, but yeah. So
I don't really know where I was going with this topic, but I just was on that list of
religious-based
Like that it's
religion
pretty.
pushing for banned books.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
it's
I think
that's
pretty.
what you were
It's
doing.
pretty safe to say that maybe not all, but a pretty big amount of the influence that comes into deciding whether or not a book is banned is probably from some kind of religious group or influence. Yeah.
Yeah, and a funny example of that, if you guys have watched Parks and Rec, when they're doing their time capsule episode, there's the one dad who wants to put Twilight in the time capsule because he wants his yeah.
Oh, I do.
But because he
what a-
wants to, make his daughter proud of him or whatever. And then there's the religious figure of Parks and Rec who stands up and says, if we're putting any book in there, it's going to be the Bible.
That is somehow one of my favorite and least favorite episodes of
I
that show.
understand.
Like it hits both for me, and I don't know how.
But the second that person stood up, for a lot of people, I feel like there was a person who came to mind, or at least a situation.
It was
that
surprisingly relatable.
Yeah, it wasn't
I
something
need
that.
to clarify this. When you say a person that came to mind, for which individual? The Twilight person, because yes, or the religious person, because also yes.
The religious person, but I guess yes, also the Twilight one. But because it's a common enough occurrence that people were able to look at that character and laugh because it was like, yep, it's something that would happen. And so, yeah, that's why for me, like I said, my first experience wasn't necessarily with C.S. Lewis, but it was while I was at church camp and I was reading Harry Potter, and somebody came by. He was an older kid, and he was like, you know you're going to hell if you read Harry Potter, right? And I was like, okay, bye. And that was like the extent of the interaction, because I've always been this weird. And that was when I really found out that it was controversial. Before that, much like Elijah, it wasn't something that I knew. Like, I didn't know people would really be upset about it.
I knew I knew things were controversial, but I was talking mainly about the idea of schools banning books.
Oh.
That's something I don't know. No, I knew pretty early on that Harry Potter was controversial because it was controversial in our family when I was young. But no, I really never, when growing up, I never really knew that schools would ban books. That's really what I was talking
and why
about.
was it controversial? If you don't mind sharing
Well,
a little bit of your
witchcraft.
story.
It was witchcraft. It was teaching kids to engage in witchcraft and to normalize it. I mean, like I'm saying these words because I've obviously over the years I've rationalized why people thought that. But as a kid, the only thing that I knew was that people said that there was witchcraft in it, which meant that it was basically evil to indulge in. And reading it and enjoying the story or anything was indulging in that.
And to this day, you have not seen all of the Harry Potter movies,
I know.
much to my sadness.
Yeah.
You need to try harder.
I know.
That's definitely not the reason why I haven't seen them now.
No, it's not. Well, but,
I mean,
but you missed the craze.
unfortunately, not growing up with that, yeah, I mean, now doesn't really make me that interested. And it's the same with things like Pokemon. I mean, Pokemon wasn't as intense, but I mean, I didn't grow up with Pokemon. I don't know how much of it was the same sort of Christian thing, and I don't know how much of it was that and how much of it just wasn't, just because it wasn't there. But I mean, a lot of those things, yeah, I know I missed out on a lot of those things, and I didn't get to grow up with them, and I'm not really interested in them as much now. So
Don't worry, we'll talk about Pokemon some other time. But in the meantime, Andy, Christopher, what about you guys? Was Harry Potter, I know you shared the story about Harry Potter. Was that your first experience with that kind of a thing?
Probably. Yeah, and like I said, it was fine because I was, lucky enough, I think, to have a mother who... I like to think of it as following in Jesus' footsteps in a small sort of way, right? And thinking about, if I'm going to help these people, let me go to where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom going to the place where my sister and I were, in terms of what is interesting to us, what do we care about, what do our friends like, and okay, cool. Let me check it out and make sure that it's safe for them. And if it's safe for them, then they're free to explore that. That also made it much easier when she said, "All right, get in the car. We're going to church." I'm not fighting that. You're cool. You're cool as heck. You let me read Harry Potter. Yeah,
That's fair.
if she had taken those books away, probably would have been some fighting there.
Yeah.
Right. There would have been a lot of resentment. And then when she tried to teach me all of the lessons that she has that were based on Christianity, I don't think I would have listened as well as I did.
And that's a really good point. It's a really good point, because I think that we forget that. A lot of times, I mean, there's the joke about pastors' kids and how they turn out, because a lot of pastors' kids get really sheltered. And essentially what happens is, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that. And like you said, it makes them not really want to go to church or listen, and they act out a lot, in particular after they leave home and go to college or things like that. And I think it does lead to rebellion the more that you shelter from things that don't matter, but then it gives weight to the things like when you're, for instance, if your mom told you something else, like, that was dangerous, like don't go skydiving right now or something. I don't know. I'm scared of skydiving, so I could say that.
I like that you included the words right now.
I don't know. Because I'm like, that's not really dangerous, I guess, but it scares me.
You currently don't have a parachute. Not right now.
Yeah, tell me right this second. But like it earns that trust. You know
Right.
that was something that was actually dangerous. And that's how I felt with my parents, was they weren't fear-mongering all of these things. So I knew if there was something they told me, like, we really don't want you doing this, even if I didn't necessarily understand, it was like, okay, I know that they're looking out for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Andy? You read The Kite Runner, which I don't know what that's about, but what else?
It's actually a really interesting book, and I would recommend it.
Good to know. I like books.
I also, yeah, it's okay. I do understand why it's banned. For in particular, one scene that it describes in gruesome detail is the reason that it's mostly banned. And for the essence of sparing those who have not read it, it deals with a rape scene. And this setting in Afghanistan, in Kabul. I apologize, Idris, that I can't remember how to pronounce it correctly.
We're both getting phone calls, aren't we?
No, because I'll be honest. I think he's enjoyed the podcast, and I don't think he'll care that I've messed up that. But it's one of those books that we read collectively as a class, and when we got to this part, like there was discussion about like the different aspects around it, not the actual aspects of the rape, but like different conversations that spark from it. And again, I recommend that you read the book so you have a little bit of basis for understanding what I'm talking about here. But not only that, but it delves into this conversation of, do you put yourself in harm's way to help out somebody else? And if you guys want more explanation for what that means, I'll talk to you guys after the podcast, but we have limited time here, so
Yeah, so then I guess I'm happy to move on to the other one, the most, well, there's two, but the one that I dealt with the most intimately probably was the Da Vinci Code and that craze. And what's interesting about that in my family is that my father does not really, or at least at the time, I don't know how he feels now, but he refused to buy it or read it. And my mom read it instantly. Again, banned books kind of running my blood. But anyhow, I remember my older brother wanted it for Christmas. And my mom went and bought it for him because my dad wouldn't buy it. But my dad was completely okay knowing that my mom was buying it for him. It was just that his conviction was that he did not feel like he could. And to date, I think I'm pretty sure most of the people in my family have read it. I don't know if my father ever did or not. But it was just kind of a cool thing for me to see because I knew that he didn't necessarily agree with it, but he didn't hold anybody else back by doing that. Does that make any sense?
Well, I think, yeah, it does. I think a lot
Why do I say that like every other second? Anyhow, continue.
Well, I think a lot of people nowadays, some people have a tough time remembering that you can have personal, like morals that are your morals, or I mean, saying like your own opinions doesn't really mean anything anymore because that phrase has been beaten to death twice now. Talking about my opinion, but the idea that like it's okay to have like personal morals that you are okay with or not okay with, and that's all they are. You know what I mean? So the idea for some people might be really, really surprised that like your dad wasn't okay with buying it or reading it, but he was okay with his wife buying it for his son. Some people, I guarantee, that's very, very shocking and surprising. It didn't surprise me in like a what kind of way, but it was a little different than what I or something. I wasn't really expecting that, because sometimes I think it's easy to forget that your personal opinions on things and your personal whatever compass or morals, whatever you want to call it, doesn't always have to really, affect other people, and you don't have to always, kind of like you were saying earlier in a different context, but applying to this, you don't have to hold people to those standards or hold them accountable to your personal beliefs in every case, and I think maybe to help close things up, I don't know if I won't make it the final statement, but I mean, this whole series has been on, Christianity in media and in pop culture, and some of the history of some of the movements against a lot of things in popular culture. And I think a lot of this history and stuff is very, very deep and way more intricate than one might think. But I think you can boil down a lot of it down to the idea that a lot of people forget that you not only do you not have to, but in most cases you actually shouldn't, in my opinion, hold everybody else up to the standard that you necessarily believe in, and hold everybody accountable in the way that you hold yourself accountable in, on a personal level, because even though, we've been joking about, we've been making fun of in certain ways, people who might be burning D&D manuals or certain things like that. But we try to bring it around to the idea that as funny as it might seem to us, and I'm sure a lot of people listening too, that a lot of it really does come down to people's personal beliefs. And if someone really does truly believe that anything they have, whether it be something completely unrelated to Dungeons and Dragons or something magical or whatever, or something like that, if someone really does believe that it is causing problems in their personal life with their personal relationship with God, and they choose to get rid of that thing, who are we to really tell them how stupid that is? Just like who are we to tell them that keeping that manual or that thing is also stupid? We just kind of, we'll joke about it because the intensity of the movement against it back then, I think we can kind of objectively say was way over the top and crazy, and a lot of people did it out of fear, That's sort of my closing thought on everything, which I know wasn't necessarily a single closing thought, but the idea that it's okay to have a personal moral compass or personal beliefs about very specific things. And it's okay to believe that maybe some people maybe almost wishing or thinking that your personal belief would be good for everyone, while still understanding that you don't and you shouldn't try to hold everyone up to that standard or whatever your belief is.
And I'll go back to what Christopher said and say that was a great witness. That was a great witness for us. I know that I respected both my dad and my mom so much coming out of that situation. And there was no part of me that thought, geez, Dad, you didn't want to read this book. It was like, wow, how amazing and how strong must your faith be in God and your trust in your wife and your son, that you're willing to say, no, I trust you guys with this, and to not hold them to that. It was just so, again, it leads to that trust. I trust my father and my mother very much in that way. And so I wanted to just bring it back to that and to how that really is an effective witness of Christ. We're not just talking about things on this podcast that make us upset all the time, but we're talking about sort of the reason why they make us upset. And I think for me, the core of that comes from by just going out and blankly saying everything sucks. What you're doing is you're effectively killing what could be such a great witness. And that's the core of, I think, where a lot of the times I start to look and say, okay, church is stupid. And the comma but always comes from thinking about things that my parents did or other great spiritual mentors that I've had. And that's the church Christ wants, is a church where where we are witnesses for him.
And sadly, we are running out of time, but I want to invite anybody who's listened, paid attention this long, continue the conversation online. Leave us a comment down in the YouTube.
Down in the YouTube.
I assume it's where you're watching it because we're trying, but we suck at getting this in other places. Go to our Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, like, comment, subscribe, all of that information. But most importantly, tell us what you think. What do you think about the Harry Potter books? What do you think about Lord of the Rings, the Da Vinci Code, any of those books, the banned books?
What are other ones you experienced?
Yeah, do you have your own experience with a banned book? We want to know. We want to hear what you guys have to say about it.
I'd be very interested to see other people's experiences with that as well. Because I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of unique experiences with that.
And on that note, from all of us here at Church is Stupid,
Comma but.
Goodbye from Ruth,
Andy,
Elijah,
and Christopher.
have a good night.